걔네들에 대한 probability distribution이 있다고 가정을 하면, 그러면 얘네들을 생성을 해줄 수 있는 어떤 underlying distribution이 있는 거죠. 그렇죠? 그러면 이 디스트리뷰션이 예를 들면 가우시안인데 이 가우시안은 파라미터가 있잖아요. 그러니까 정해진 뭔가 우리는 모르지만 뭔가 가우시안에 의해서 생성이 됐고, 이 가우시안 디스트리뷰션을 또 결정짓기 위해서 특정한 가우시안 디스트리뷰션을 결정짓기 위해서 필요한 파라미터가 있죠. 그 파라미터가 보통 이제 세타로 표시를 해요. 그러니까 이제 이거는 이제 세타라는 파라미터에 의해서 결정되는 어떤 언더라인 디스트리뷰션, 거기서 x와 y가 이렇게 막 생성이 되는 거예요. 그러면 이제 여기서 이제 컨디셔널이 나와요. p x 기분 y, p의 y 기분 x, 이런 식의 디스트리뷰션이 뭐가 나오거든요. 근데 중요한 건 이 세타는 모르긴 하지만 상수로 보는 거예요. 그러니까 가우시안에서 생성은 됐는데 그 가우시안의 이제 파라미터가 평균은 3이고 분산은 2예요. 근데 이거 모르죠. 하여튼 모르는데 하여튼 상수예요. 그러면 얘네들은 하여튼 랜덤 베리어블은 아닌 거죠. 네, 이것까지가 프리컨티스트 어프로치가 되는 거고, 지금 이거는 그러면 뭐 제너러티브냐 디스크리미너티브냐, 이건 뭐 좀 하여튼 그 클래시피케이션이나 이런 쪽에서의 이야기긴 한데, 이거는 일단은 제너러티브 모델인 거예요. 제너러티브 모델은 그러니까 아까 얘기했던 그 기본적인 개념은 뭐냐면, 그러니까 아까 잠깐 얘기했던 뭐 리니어 리그레션, 로지스틱 리그레션, 우리가 뭐 앤드류잉이나 뭐 아니면 머신러닝에서 뭔가 배운다고 할 때 어떤 뭐 프로바빌리티 디스트리뷰션, 뭐 가우시안이 뭐 이런 거 한 번도 나온 적이 없잖아요. 그냥 그레디언트 디센트로 막 풀잖아요. 그러니까 그거는 뭔가 제너러티브 모델이 아닌 거라고 볼 수가 있고, 왜냐면 그 x와 y를 생성을 하는 어떤 디스트리뷰션이 뭔가 있어서 그 디스트리뷰션의 파라미터가 뭐 이런 거여서 이런 걸 가지고 뭘 우리가 어떻게 했다 이런 요소가 전혀 없잖아요. 그러니까 이런 거는 제너러티브 모델이 아닌 거고요. 근데 이제 여기 반면에 이거 같은 경우 이제 x, y 이런 어떤 것들이 다 랜덤 베리어블이고 이걸 생성을 해주는 뭔가 이제 언더라인 디스트리뷰션이 있다. 그러면 이게 일단 여기서 이제 얘네들이 이제 생성이 된 혹은 샘플링이 된 데이터라고 보기 때문에 그런 경우 이제 이거를 제너러티브 모델이라고 부르고요. 그다음에 프리컨티스트냐 베이지안, 이거는 이제 차이가 어디서 오냐면, 아까 얘기했던 세타 있잖아요. 이 파라미터, 그러니까 언더라인 디스트리뷰션, 그러니까 제너러티브 모델을 일단은 가정을 했을 때 그 언더라인 디스트리뷰션의 파라미터가 아까 얘기했던 그러니까 모르지만 상수냐, 고정된 상수냐, 아니면 얘네들 자체도 우리가 랜덤 베리어블로 볼 것이냐, 여기서 이제 베이시안이냐 프리컨티스트냐의 차이가 거기서 이제 나뉘는 거거든요. 네. 그래서 이제 프리컨티스트나 이거는 다 이게 세타가 이 전면에 나올 수가 없어요. 왜냐하면 세타는 모르긴 하지만 이거는 다 파라미터로 분류가 돼서 이 세미콜론이 이제 이쪽을 이제 파라미터로 우리가 얘기를 하는데, 이거는 하여튼 랜덤 베리어블이 아닌 그냥 상수기 때문에 이거는 랜덤 베리어블 형태를 이렇게 갖고 올 수가 없는데, 그러니까 베이시안 어프로치에서는 이게 이제 뭐 예를 들면 이렇게 되는 거예요. 세타 기분 x, y. 왜냐면 얘도 이제 어떤 얘 나름의 랜덤 베리어블이기 때문에 쟤도 전면에 나와서 쟤에 대한 어떤 컨디셔널이나 뭐 이런 디스트리뷰션 자체가 정의가 되는 거죠. 약간 이런 식의 어프로치가 일단 기본적인 어떤 베이시안과 프리컨티스트의 그거거든요. 차이점이거든요. 네. 네. 그 아까 좀 뭐 이야기했던 건데 조금 질문 나온 거를 바탕으로 좀 이야기를 하면, 하여튼 그 지금 뭐 여러 기준들이 이제 나왔잖아요. 뭐 제너러티브냐 디스크리미너티브냐, 뭐 베이시안이냐 프리컨티스트냐, 뭐 파라메트릭 안 파라메트릭, 그건 일단 우리가 뭐 열애로 하고 아까 그건 우리가 이야기를 했으니까, 제너러티브 vs나 뭐 디스크리미너티브 혹은 이제 그 프리컨티스트 베이지안, 뭐 이거는 기본적으로 이제 두 개 서로 다른 독립적인 기준이에요. 독립적인 기준. 근데 이제 내가 약간 틀릴 수도 있는데, 나도 뭐 확률을 아주 잘하는 건 아니라서 약간 좀 그냥 좀 러프하게만 이해를 하고 있는 거라서 약간의 좀 왜곡이나 뭐 좀 건너뛰는 게 있을 수 있긴 한데, 일단은 뭔가 이게 정확한 표현 자체가 아니긴 한데, 뭐 디스크리미너티브, 이제 제너러티브, 이거는 기본적으로 이제 이쪽은 약간은 꼭 그런 건 아니에요. 뒤쪽에서 또 차이가 좀 설명이 되겠지만, 이제 이 어프로치는 우리가 아까 얘기했던 것처럼 뭐 앤드류 머신러닝에서나 뭐 이렇게 뭐 머신러닝에서 우리가 뭐 리니어 리그레션, 로지스틱 리그레션 할 때 뭐 데이터 갖고 그레디언트 디센트 막 업데이트 할 때 어떤 이 x나 y, 그러니까 인풋 피처나 타겟 베리어블이 어떤 이제 랜덤 베리어블이어서 이런 어떤 프로바빌리티 디스트리뷰션을 전혀 가정을 하지 않았잖아요. 네. 그러면 이제 제너러티브가 아닌 거예요. 왜 그러냐? 우리가 생성한, 그러니까 우리가 실제로 콜렉트한 데이터, x, y라는 이 페어가 이 페어에 대해서 우리는 어떤 디스트리뷰션도 고려를 하고 있지 않았던 거거든요. 그게 고려가 되려면 그 디스트리뷰션은 뭐 일단 있고 그 디스트리뷰션이 예를 들면 가우시안이다, 뭐 베타 디스트리뷰션이다, 아니면 뭐 이상한 디스트리뷰션이다, 약간 이런 어떤 디스트리뷰션 가정을 한다면 그 이제 우리가 뭐 보통 이게 하이퍼 파라미터처럼 이거 디스트리뷰션은 예를 들면 뭐 어떤 클래스의 디스트리뷰션이다라고 보통 이렇게 정해 놓고 이제 들어가거든요. 네. 이거 어쨌건 이거 자체로 고려를 안 하기 때문에 그건 이제 제너러티브 모델이 아닌 거예요. 근데 이제 이걸 고려를 한다는 얘기는 그리고 그게 왜 제너러티브 모델이라고 불리느냐? 바로 이 우리가 그 수집한 우리가 확보한 이 데이터인 x, y라는 이 페어들이 어떤 언더라인 디스트리뷰션이 있어서 여기서 뭔가 샘플이 된 어떤 그런 형태로 수집이 된 데이터다라고 생각하는 혹은 그런 이제 시작점 혹은 출발점 자체가 아까 얘기했던 것처럼 우리 데이터가 생성을 해주도록 하는 언더라인 디스트리뷰션이 뭔가 있다고 가정을 하고 들어가는 거죠. 그래서 이제 이걸 제너러티브 모델이라고 약간 부른다 거고요. 다음에는 아까 얘기했던 하여튼 이런 확률적인 개념, 그래서 언더라인 x와 y에 대한 언더라인 디스트리뷰션이라는 개념이 있을 때에 우리가 그거를 그러니까 약간은 이게 이런 텍소노미는 뭐 좀 쓰면 다른 뭐 잘 아는 사람이 개똥 철학이 있는 아니면 모르는 애가 막 그런다고 좀 걱정이 드는데 하여튼 여기에서 그러니까 이쪽에서는 프리컨티스트 그런 걸 따질 수가 없어요. 네, 물론 이제 뭐 MLE 솔루션이 뭐 실제로 리스트 스퀘어 솔루션과 이제 동등하다 뭐 그런 이제 증명도 있고 한데 일단 기본적으로 그레디언트 센트나 아니면 노멀 이퀘이션을 통해서 이제 얻어내는 그거에서는 어떤 확률적인 개념도 안 들어가 있기 때문에 어떤 MLE에서 나오는 그 프리컨티스트 프리컨티스트는 뭐 MLE라고 하고 뭐 이런 얘기가 있거든요. 그래서 그 확률적인 개념 전혀 안 들어가서 일단은 확률적인 개념이 들어간 이 제너러티브 모델이라고 해야 될까? 이쪽에서 이제 프리컨티스트냐 아니면 이제 베이시안이냐 뭐 요걸 이제 따지는데 아까 요거의 기본적인 주된 이제 차이가 이제 큰 차이는 뭐냐면 네, 기본적으로 이제 우리가 뭐 x랑 y랑이 어떤 디스트리뷰션을 따른다. 근데 이 디스트리뷰션이 뭔가 가우시안이긴 가우시안이에요. 근데 그 가우시안의 파라미터가 있잖아요. j가 아니라 세미콜론이요. 가우시안의 이제 파라미터가 있는 거죠. 그래서 요게 이제 u 시그마 스퀘어라는 어떤 벡터 형태로 되어있는 파라미터고 이 파라미터가 정해졌을 때에 이제 만들어지는 어떤 그 특정한 가우시안 디스트리뷰션이면 가우시안 디스트리뷰션 거기서부터 뭔가 이 x, y라는 페어가 막 생성이 됐다라고 가정을 하고 근데 우리는 이 파라미터를 모르기 때문에 우리가 갖고 있는 데이터로부터 이 어떤 값들을 우리가 에스티메이트를 해내는 거죠. 네. 근데 이제 여기서는 이 뮤와 시그마 스퀘어는 얘네들이 어떤 XY를 생성해주는 디스트리뷰션의 파라미터인 거는 맞는데 근데 뮤와 시그마 자체가 랜덤 베리어블이라는 가정은 여기는 없죠. 그냥 없는 거예요. 그죠? 얘들은 아까 얘기했던 것처럼 unknown, 그러니까 모르긴 하지만 그래서 우리가 맞춰야 되는, 최대한 잘 맞춰야 되는 값이긴 하지만 얘들은 상수로 어떤 특정한 값 하나로 딱 고정이 되어서 존재하는 거예요. 물론 그건 10만이 알겠지만 어찌됐건 얘네들은 모르긴 해도 딱 그러니까 우리가 모르지만 정해진 어떤 값이 있는 거예요. 그러면 이게 랜덤 베리어블이라는 게 아닌 거고요. 그러니까 뭐 랜덤 베리어블 가정을 안 했잖아요. 네. 근데 이제 얘네들도 역시나 뭔가 랜덤 베리어블로 이제 생각을 하면 그러면 이제 그게 이제 베이시안이 되는 거고요. 네. 그래서 이제 아까 얘기했던 것처럼 이제 얘네들도 뭔가 디스트리뷰션을 갖고 있고요. 그 다음에 이제 예를 들면 뭐 이런 거 이제 p의 x, y 뭐 이렇게도 쓸 수 있고 이건 이제 조인트죠. 네, 영어로 또. Okay, so here in this model, we assume x, y is generated from a particular underlying distribution, and here, if the underlying distribution is Gaussian, which is the parameter of theta, which is composed of mu and sigma squared, and still in this case, even though these are unknown, but they are considered as a constant value, not random variable, right? So we can, consider this a joint distribution, which is assuming a particular parameter value, which are still a constant, right? And then, for example, like we can consider this, right? This conditional or, this kind of a posterior which is called a posterior. Okay, so we can consider these types of a probability distribution, but these data, although unknown, they are just a scalar, fixed value or constant value, not a random variable. But if we start to assume these are also a random variable, and then, yeah, this guy, the semicolon is actually changed into this because this is a random variable. So given this particular random variable, what is the distribution of this x comma y? Conditioned on this random variable data. And so most importantly, we can think of this data which is placed in the first part and x comma y, for example, okay, because this one is a random variable, and thus using that as a main kind of random variable that have a particular probability distribution, right? So in this case, we can consider this kind of conditional distribution, which is given a particular data that we collected, what is the probability distribution of this random variable data, okay? So if we start to, if we accept this kind of views, and then build up our algorithm based on this view, and then it is viewed as Bayesian approach, okay? And then what does that mean? Of having the probability distribution, yeah, again, as I mentioned in the previously, even after, we are given a specific data set, okay? And even after we are given a specific data set, and after running a particular optimization algorithm and so on, this data is not determined as a single value, okay? They are also random variable, which has an uncertainty, which means if that has a distribution like this, okay, so it means that even after we considered all the data that we have, data is not uniquely determined. They can have a infinitely many different choices or cases with a different probability. Any other questions so far? 네.
경험적으로 어떤 방식이 더 좋다는
네. 그 경험적으로는 okay, so what's the practical usage of this Bayesian approach? Okay. So again, we understood this Bayesian approach needs or additional, requires additional step of choosing a single value from this distribution, right? So in order to have a single, one single optimal model, for example, for performing the prediction and so on, we need to choose or determine a single value out of these many possible choices, right? Having this particular distribution, right? So that strategy was, I explained those strategy, by using, picking up the mode or the median or the mean value, okay? So that is the common kind of three strategy that people use. But what is the practical advantage or disadvantage between these two kind of frequentist and the Bayesian approaches? So, in the case of Bayesian, this kind of Bayesian approaches, if we, for example, if we pick up the mean value such as that, okay, and then in some special case, we can also show or prove that the frequentist approach solution is actually the same as the Bayesian approach solution. So in some sense, they are connected to each other. So but one really practical or important benefit or advantage of Bayesian approach is that we can impose our prejudice or our prior knowledge to our parameter. So that is really the main difference. So for example, let me describe it in a little bit more detail. Okay, so again, we understand that our parameters themselves are a random variable, having, for example, this kind of distribution, right? So it can be viewed as like P of data when considering our data pairs, for example, right? But So usually, what was the role of theta? So for example, theta is the parameter of the Gaussian distribution, for example, that will generate this x comma y, right? So the natural process of these generation is that, okay, so we are given some random variable theta, okay, and then depending on this value, so we will generate x comma y, right? So in this case, even before considering our data pairs x comma y, we are assuming that theta is random variable, right? And what will be the distribution of, or what will be the probability distribution of this theta, even when considering our actual collected data, okay? In this case, this data, for example, we have mu and sigma squared is our parameter, for example, in the case of Gaussian distribution. And then what will be the distribution that these two random variables will follow? Okay, so yeah, we can incorporate any kinds of probability distribution depending on our definition of these two random variable type. But typically, suppose we assume that these are also the Gaussian distribution. Yeah, just as an example. And Gaussian distribution also needs parameters, right? So it's like these are working as a parameter. But in order to be able to define it as a random variable, then we need this default default PDF or specification, default specification of this random variable even before looking at or considering the data, right? So yeah, up to this point, we assume that this variable is a Gaussian class of a probability distribution, but this Gaussian is requiring their own parameters, right? Parameters are random variable, and this one is defined as some class of probability distribution, and this class of probability distribution will also require its own parameters, right? So it's like really chaining, chain kind of patterns, right? So suppose this one is alpha and, for example, beta squared. Okay, so yeah, so here we can also think of the question that are these two parameters of this, that specifies the distribution of this parameter. Okay? Will these alpha and beta be a constant, or can they be also random variables, right? So in the Bayesian perspective, why not just considering these two as also a random variable, right? And then if they are also random variable, and then this guy will also follow some of its own distribution, right? For example, it's also a Gaussian. So what will be the parameter of this Gaussian, right? So this kind of approach is called hierarchical Bayesian. Okay. So at some point, we need to start with some constant, just like the frequentist approach. But it goes through like multiple generation steps. Okay. So suppose these are constant. Okay. So at some point, we need some assumption that these parameters are constant. Okay. And then from this distribution, and then those alpha and beta are some random variable, and then given these random variable, and then mu can be generated as well, right? And so this kind of a multi-step kind of approach is called the hierarchical Bayes. Okay, and if you are interested in this in this literature, the Bayesian statistics is the one that you can study all these related to this topic. And so let me give some example of this hierarchical or multi-step generation approach. So is suppose x is x or mu is just a uniform random variable ranging between 0 to 3. Okay, and then your random variable x is following the Gaussian distribution, having the mean of mu and maybe 2 squared. Okay, so this is a simple hierarchical or multi-step generation process, right? So of course mu and x are random variable, right? So here in this case we can consider mu and x, they are joint, but more naturally, yeah. Suppose we want to model this probability distribution. I mean, yeah, so here the typical question of the Bayesian statistics is that what will be the distribution of this, okay, joint distribution. So this is, yeah, two-dimensional random variable, right? Because we are having two scalar. So one axis is mu, and the other axis is what? X, okay? So in this case, so mu will have the range between 0 to 3, right? So the joint distribution, okay, will be like, so if mu was 0, what will be the conditional distribution of x given mu? So it will definitely follow just 0, 2 squared, right? So that is the conditional distribution of an x when mu is fixed at some value, right? And so mu is, suppose mu is 0, and then the conditional distribution will be drawn like this. So that Gaussian, okay? So mu is fixed at 0, and then when chopping or slicing, this two-dimensional distribution, okay? Vertically along the mu is equal to 0, and then the corresponding distribution is this guy, okay? And then what about mu being equal to 1, okay? In this case, along this line, what will be the distribution? So the distribution is something like this, right? So you can easily imagine that. Imagine the joint distribution of this hierarchical or multi-step generation process, right? So the joint distribution will be like this single Gaussian will be gradually moving towards the this direction, right? So at 3, so the distribution will be something like this, right? Okay, so this is a multi-step approach. So in many practical applications, we can define these specific steps of a generation process of our involved random variable. So our involved random variable is of mu and x. And so which one is a natural order of this generation process? Yeah, first mu should be fixed, right? And then x, the distribution of an x will be fully specified. But what about this case? Can we consider this? Can we consider this conditional distribution, which kind of reverses, okay, which reverses the generation order, or generation steps, right? So, yeah, let's consider, for example, when x is equal to 1, and consider this conditional distribution of mu when x is given as 1. Okay? So in this case, what's the intuitive meaning of that distribution and this joint distribution? Okay? And that distribution is like so we have to have a fixed value of 1, right? So that is corresponding to here, right? So we just chop it over here, right? And then we have this two-dimensional mountain, right? So that has vertically it's a single model Gaussian mountain, and then that Gaussian mountain is moving towards the upper right direction, right? And then what is the distribution when slicing this distribution at this point? Okay? in that case, yeah, let's bring that here, and then this is mu when x is fixed as 1, and then probably the distribution, it will be monotonically decreasing, right? Does it make sense? Because, oh no, it is not, right? So when mu is set as 1, okay, mu is set as 1, the probability will be peaked, right? So it will be something like this, right? But can we specify this distribution as a closed form or mathematical representation? It is not, because even though this looks Gaussian, but it's definitely not a Gaussian. So the distribution is really defined between 0 to 3, right? And some distribution like this, okay? Okay, so yeah, usually it is difficult or impossible to have a clean or close to form mathematical representation of this posterior distribution, which reverses this generation order in this multi-step modeling. Okay, but what if this posterior distribution? I mean, intuitively, you can understand the term of a posterior distribution as the distribution when reversing this generation process. Okay, so typically we consider the parameters that is generated first, and then based on these parameters that are specified, and then we will generate actual data items. And so if we reverse this order, and then given our collected data, what is our distribution of parameters? Okay, so typically the posterior distribution is the distribution for our parameters to estimate. Okay. Okay, so now we can consider this distribution, which is usually difficult to write cleanly as a single mathematical form, right? But what if this distribution can be easily represented as a single or clean closed form representation? Okay, so we can also consider this kind of simpler or a little bit fortunate case, which make it easy to model this posterior distribution. Okay. Yeah. So in this story, there is a notion that comes up, which is called conjugate prior. Okay, conjugate prior. Conjugate prior. Okay, so let me describe the meaning of this conjugate prior. So conjugate prior is, suppose this x or the second step generation is defined in this form. For example, this is a Gaussian, okay, and our parameter is used as a mean parameter. I mean the parameter of mean in our Gaussian distribution. Okay, and then at this point, when looking at this relationship, I mean this probability distribution actually is not dependent on whether mu is this uniform distribution, or maybe this can also be Gaussian distribution, or it can be some arbitrary distribution like this kind of distribution, right? So we can define any distribution for this prior distribution of mu, or this distribution for mu, right? But once mu is defined and x, conditional distribution of an x when given a fixed mu, it still be Gaussian distribution, right? Their mean will change. Okay. So in this case, suppose we chose the Gaussian distribution for this first step parameter of mu. And then when considering like this kind of generation process, yeah, they can have kind of this kind of generation process by following the natural order of first picking up the mu and generating the conditional distribution of x, which is following the natural order, right? And then we can easily draw this joint distribution in this manner, right? But now our question is, when given a fixed x value, and then when slicing this, right, and that distribution is a posterior distribution of this guy, which reverses the generation process, right? And then usually we understand that this distribution is kind of complicated or not easily determined or defined as a single mathematical expression, right? But somehow, if your x, which is corresponding to the second step generation, if the second step generation is a Gaussian, and then if the first one, okay, if the first one is following the Gaussian, Gaussian, and then this posterior distribution is also still a Gaussian, okay, which means at least the class of the probability distribution still remains the same. Okay, again, starting with our parameter, which follows the Gaussian, for example, and then picked up from this Gaussian distribution, and then we follow another distribution of an x, right? For example, that distribution is, for example, uniform distribution. Okay, it's Gaussian and then uniform, for example. Okay, and then when reversing the order and then considering this distribution of mu given x, and that distribution is still remain in the same class of distribution. That is called the conjugate prime. So let me show the example. Okay, so this table, from the two-step generation process in mind, having that in mind, so this conjugate prior distribution is indicating the distribution for our parameter without, before considering any data, right? So the original or starting point, the initial distribution at the starting point for our parameter. Okay, so suppose that distribution is beta, and then picking up the sample chosen from this beta distribution, and then that distribution, that parameter, that chosen value or sampled value from this prior distribution is used as a parameter for the second step distribution. Okay, and that second step distribution is following the Bernoulli distribution, and then when considering like a reversed order posterior distribution, that distribution for this parameter, when after considering our data, and that distribution is still beta. So that is a conjugate prior. Okay? And yeah, more yeah, so this is a closely related or directly related to quite widely used machine learning method called the latent Dirichlet allocation, which is one representative topping modeling method for text analysis. So yeah, we can see this kind of Dirichlet and multinomial. Okay, so that is like so our okay, so we have to we first consider multinomial distribution. So what is the multinomial distribution? It's just a categorical kind of distribution or categorical variable, or so suppose we have three different outcomes as one random variable. So for example, dog, cat, and maybe sheep. Okay, and then so the distribution is 30% and 50% and 40%. Okay, so this is called a multi-lowly distribution. Okay, and then now let's just consider the parameter of this multi-lowly distribution. I mean, this one will work as the second step generation in the total process. So what is the parameter that we need to specify this multi-lowly distribution? Suppose we have three categories in total, and then the parameter can be thought of as the first one and the second one. Okay, and then what about the third one? The third one will always be represented as this guy, right? Or in general, let's just write it as a gamma, okay? And then our parameters are specified as alpha, beta, and gamma. So alpha, beta, and gamma, they are parameters of this multi-lowly distribution, and we need to satisfy the additional constraint of this guy, right? And then now, let's think of these alpha, beta, and gamma as random variables, okay? And then alpha, beta, and gamma. Gamma is following some distribution, okay? Some distribution. It can be uniform distribution, or it can be any other distribution, okay? So, yeah, one of the possible distribution is Dirichlet distribution. So, so we see some weird triangular shape, right? So that triangular shape is this triangular shape. I mean the internal point, all the points inside of this triangle is actually all the possible points that are satisfying this constraint. Okay. So, for example, in this case, if we choose this guy, it's 0, 0, 1. Okay, and then for example, if we choose this guy, and then it will be some points like 0.1 and 0.2 and 0.7, for example. Okay, so yeah, we can kind of view or we can represent all the possible three-dimensional vectors which have this kind of constraint as this. This triangle, okay? So these are all the possible parameter values of this alpha, beta, and gamma, okay? And then we can think of their corresponding distribution, that defines the underlying distribution of this guy, right? So this guy, there are many, there could be many different distributions, but one of these distributions is Dirichlet distribution. And this underlying distribution or prior distribution will also need its own parameter, as we understood or as we saw in the previous case, right? And this Dirichlet distribution, depending on its parameters, we can see like different probability distribution. So again, so this one is one particular Dirichlet distribution following a specific parameters, its own parameters, and then the other one, and so on. Okay. So the Dirichlet distribution, how many parameters do we have in to specify the Dirichlet distribution? So we usually have, Dirichlet distribution need or requires three different parameters. But that parameters could be 1, 1, 1, and 3, 3, 3, and so on. And these are different Dirichlet distributions with respect to different parameters of it. Okay. So in this case, what about this? when we set the parameters of Dirichlet distribution as 1, 1, and 1, and then within this, it's called the simplex that has the sum of the three values as 1. Okay, in this case, the distribution is uniform. Okay, it's a uniform. Then what about this 3, 3, 3? In this case, the brighter one, you can view it as a little bit higher mountain. Okay, so in this case, the distribution is like that. Okay, it's a more kind of steep and narrow kind of distribution, and if the parameters are different, 5 to 2, and then it means the distribution is skewed to a certain direction. Or, more interestingly, what about this case? This case is like, so all of them are kind of, a little bit dark, and only the bright part is along the vertices or edges, right? So in this case, if you imagine it, and then the distribution will be really high along the edge or at this extreme point. Okay, so if we use this kind of distribution as the as the parameter distribution to be used as a multinodal distribution. Let's imagine this situation, and if we assume this as our prior distribution, and then it tends to sample this extreme value, right? And then your corresponding multinodal distribution that will work in the second phase, okay? And then these distribution will be really extreme, like 100% and 0% and 0%, or 0, 100, 100, or if it is sampled around here, for example, and then it means one of these classes will have a 0 probability and maybe 50 and 50. Okay, so it prefers this kind of simpler or more extreme distributions. Okay, so that is a Dirichlet distribution. So we were discussing about the conjugate prior, right? So we assume our parameters are following the Dirichlet distribution, and then our x is following the multinodal distribution specified by the parameter of alpha, beta, and gamma. Okay, and then from here, so we can also think of this posterior distribution of alpha, beta, gamma, given a particular observation or collected data of an x, right? And then, similar to the previous case, it is generally it will not be easy to define this as a clean form of a distribution. But somehow, if you compute those kind of two steps of process of first generating the parameter of a Dirichlet and the second step of a multinodal, and then if we reverse the order, by using the Bayes rule, you can represent this probability distribution. But the main point is this distribution will still be Dirichlet. Okay, so that is main point. So we start from Dirichlet, and those parameters will work at those random variable will work as a parameter for the second step of a generation, which is if that second step generation is a multinodal, then if we reverse the order, then this posterior distribution will still follow the same class of distribution, Dirichlet. Okay, but in general, suppose we started from here, 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2 as our prior distribution, and then it can be written as this, right? And then will this distribution be the, we now understand this one will still be Dirichlet, but will this be also following this? It is not, right? So they are affected by our data, right? So which one is actually affected by our data? Those parameters are affected. For example, 0.2 plus, it is a really Yep. By following this multi-nodal distribution, suppose we obtained 100 samples. Okay, we obtained 100 samples, but among these 100 samples, 70 of them is maybe dog, and 20 of them is cat, and 10 of them is sheep. Okay, so that is the additional information that we obtained from our collected data, right? And then now the posterior distribution of these parameters, okay, when considering the observed data, and then these parameters will have like 0.2 plus some alpha times 70 over 100, and 0.2 plus alpha is some fixed parameter, for example, and 20 and so on. Okay. So our data will influence the initial parameter. Okay. Yeah. So because we maintain the same class of a probability distribution, but in this case or in this scenario, where is our data actually doing something? Okay. So that part is actually through our data affects the distribution of our parameters through modifying the prior distribution parameters, okay, in this part. Okay. So again, I wanted to emphasize that the notion of the conjugate prior. Okay, conjugate prior. So conjugate prior is the starting point of the parameters class of distribution, and even after going to the second step and then reversing the direction, and then that parameter distribution, even after considering the data, and that parameter distribution is remaining the same as the original class of distribution. Okay, but only the parameters are changing. Okay, okay, so so the conjugate prior is basically the pair of these relationships. Okay, so if we start from data and then using those random variables as a parameter of this Bernoulli, and then the posterior distribution of our parameter will still remain as beta. Okay? And how is this parameters are changed? So these are how the parameters are changed. Okay, so suppose we started with the parameters of prior distribution as alpha and beta, just like 0.2 and 0.2 and 0.2, right? That we initially started from here, right? So these are initial parameters, right? And then once we go through this this data, okay, and then posterior distribution will still be beta distribution, but the parameters will be changed in this way. Okay. So all of them are nicely organized in this simple table. Okay, so so in the case of a Dirichlet and followed by multi-nodal, the parameters are changed by this one, starting from alpha to alpha plus the sum of this. Okay. So here, I didn't remember fully those kind of formula, but based on that formula, the parameter of this posterior Dirichlet distribution will be like, we started with the 0.2, right, and plus just 7, 0.2 plus 20, and 0.2 plus 10. So that will be resulting parameters of our posterior distribution. So this is just a vector form where alpha is a vector and the xi is a vector that contains the frequency of our observation.
저 포뮬러에서 데이터가 들어가는 게 파라미터를 바꿀 때 어떻게 식이 도출되는 MLD 관점에서
ML이요? 이 MLE 관점에서는 이제 70개, 20개, 10개가 나왔잖아요. 그러면 이제 그냥 MLE 관점에서는 그냥 베스트 파라미터 아니면 MLE 에스티메이터가 0.7, 0.2, 0.1로 얻어져요. 그건 이제 MLE의 그 정확한 그 식을 잘 그걸 하면 옵티멀 파라미터가 그렇게 얻어지는 거고요. 그 다음에 지금 여기서는 네, 저 파라미터가 실제로 데이터를 우리가 봤을 때 이 데이터를 실제로 생성했을 법한 그 파라미터 디스트리뷰션은 얘는 여전히 하여튼 그 디리슐레를 따른다는 거고요. 디리슐레 파라미터가 아까 봤던 것처럼 70.2, 20.2, 10.2가 된다는 뜻이고요. 네.
제가 궁금한 거 뒤에 시그마가 어떻게 저렇게 나오는지.
이거요?
네, 저렇게 조정하면 최적의 파라미터가 될 거라는 게
네.
어떻게 이어지는 건지.
아, 이거는 최적의 파라미터, 여기서는 어떤 최적의 파라미터라는 개념도 없고요. 이거는 이제 어떻게 한 거냐면 이제 그 ML이니 이런 개념은 여기서는 안 들어갔고 이제 어떻게 한 거냐면 이제 얘를 가지고 이제 랜덤 베리어블을 해갖고 우리가 이제 여기다 더 이상 못 쓰겠네. 네. 일단 요거를 만들었고요. 세타는 먼저 이제 dir, 디슐레, 알파, 베타, gamma 이렇게 된 거죠. 그리고 우리가 어떤 옵저베이션 100개 중에 이제 70개, 20개, 10개 이렇게 한 건데 이러한 이제 디스트리뷰션을 이러한 우리가 옵저베이션을 우리가 확보를 했을 때 그랬을 때 세타 기본 x를 그냥 구한 거예요. 이것만 구한 거예요. 여기서 어떤 뭐 옵티멀 값이 뭐네 뭐 이런 개념이 여기까지 아직 여기까지는 안 들어간 거고요. 그냥 이것만 구한 거예요. 이건 어떻게 구한 거냐 하면 이거는 뭐 베이스 룰로 구하죠. 그래서 뭐 세타의 b의 x 기본 세타 이렇게 해갖고 네. 이걸 뭐 이렇게 뭐 하잖아요. 그렇죠? 네. 보통 이제 이거는 우리가 데이터만 있을 때 어떤 마지널 디스트리뷰션 뭐 베이즈롤 뭐 뻔한 베이즈롤 식인데 또 이런 어떤 스페셜 아니면 이런 뭐 예를 들면 투스텝 어프로치라고 불리는 뭐 이런 하이어키컬 베이즈 같은 어프로치에서 이것도 잘 이해하기는 또 좀 어려울 수 있고 그다음에 이거 자체를 또 실제로 이제 구하지 못한다. 그래서 이걸 또 뭐라 그러냐면 이제 파티션 펑션이라고 또 그런데 뭐 베이지한 그 과목이 아닌데 어떻게 뭐 이야기를 이렇게 오래 할 줄은 몰랐지만 아니 근데 뭐 나도 이 정도로만 알고 있어요. 뭐 옛날에 배우긴 했는데 좀 많은 부분 까먹었고 근데 다만 이제 큰 하이 레벨에서는 이 정도의 스토리는 좀 가지고 있어도 좋지 않을까 싶은데 어쨌든 뭐 이거가 그 조인트에 뭐 이렇게 되잖아요. 노멀라이즈 팩터 그래서 얘만 구한 거예요. 얘만. 혹은 얘가 이제 여전히 디리슐레다. 그러니까 얘가 이제 멀티 놀리고 얘는 이제 디리슐레. 그래서 이걸 두 개를 곱한 거를 식을 쫙 써봤더니 이게 여전히 디리슐레 디스트리뷰션이 되고 다만 그 디리슐레 디스트리뷰션의 파라미터가 이제 원래 스타팅 포인트로서 우리가 썼던 예를 들면 0.2, 0.2, 0.2에서 70, 20, 10이다. 그러면 70.2, 20.2, 10.2가 이렇게 된다는 뜻이에요. 네. 그 다음에 여기서는 그러면 하나의 옵티멀한 파라미터를 구해야 되겠다라고 하면 그걸 어떻게 구하느냐? 아까의 그 두 번, 그러니까 어디셔널 스텝이 필요해요. 저기서 이제 모드를 뽑든 미인을 뽑든 뭐 뭔가 하여튼 뽑는 그 두 번째 스텝의 어프로치가 필요해서 그 다음 싱글 어떤 걸 뽑아야지 되고 네. 또 다른 질문 있어요? Okay, so yeah, so in this scenario, in this overall process, I also want to also point out the following aspects. So in this case, let's think of how much these parameters were changed. Okay, so suppose our data or our observation is in total 100. Okay, and then this is the resulting new parameters. But suppose we only obtain 10 data, for example, 7, 2, 1. Okay, and in this case, what will be the corresponding parameters 7.2 and 2.2 and 1.2, right? So starting from 0.2 and 0.2 and 0.2, okay? So which one has been going through a bigger changes? Of course, the first scenario, right? The first scenario, the resulting parameters were more dominated by our data, right? So typically, after obtaining this posterior distribution in this conjugate prior setting, okay, and then we have an initial starting parameter of our prior distribution, which are still constant value that we start with, okay? And then we go through our data, and then these data will change our parameter in a certain manner, okay? But in terms of the degree of these changes, okay? In general, if we use more and more data, and then these data will influence more and more, our parameters. Will change more values in our parameters, okay? So what if it is really conceptual kind of explanation, but suppose we have infinitely many data, like 700,000 and 200,000 and 100,000, okay? And then will this initial parameter value will ever do anything? So it will not, right? It will not affect our posterior distribution. Our posterior distribution will completely dominated by our data, right? So in that case, it's a really high level or conceptual kind of explanation, but this type of a result, when assuming like infinitely many data, or these data are actually dominating our parameters, and then after going through a specific strategy, for example, of obtaining the mean value from this distribution, okay? So instead of choosing mode or the median, we just choose the mean value from this distribution, okay? So suppose that is our particular strategy that we chose, and in that case, that parameter, the resulting parameter, specific single set of parameter, will be the same as MLE estimate, okay? So the frequentist approach, the solution will be equivalent to the Bayesian approach, typically when we have an infinitely many data, or our data will just dominate the parameter of our posterior distribution, okay? And so in this sense, we can also think of this parameter of our prior distribution. So should we start with this value, or 1, 1, 1, or what if we start with some biased value of maybe 5, 2, and 1, for example? So that corresponds to the case where we initially have some belief or prejudice that before looking at our data, I believe that our parameters follow this specific distribution, which means the probability of the first class or dog is by default higher than the other probability. Okay, because from here it's likely to be the sampling will likely come from here, which has the highest value, a higher value towards this guy. Okay, so so this is kind of prior belief without no evidence or no ground or any kind of justification at all, right? So that way, prior is our is interpreted, or you can intuitively understand the prior distribution as some initial belief. Okay, the prior distribution the prior distribution requires a specific set of parameters, and a specific set of parameters will just reflect our initial belief, okay, or our prejudice or something like that. So this initial belief without any kind of ground or justification sounds a little bit bad thing, right? But that may not be necessarily a bad thing, because let's consider this kind of distribution. In real life, even before looking at a particular image, so you are just closing your eyes, and then someone gives a particular image, and then you have no information about that image. And then you have, still in that situation, you have to choose one of them. Okay, so which one would you choose? Okay? So suppose you observed more frequently this dog compared to, for example, cat. Okay, and then your initial belief or your initial strategy will be to choose this dog, more likely than the other one. Okay, so that way this prior is not a bad thing. Okay. So the Bayesian approach from the intuitive perspective, it's like can be viewed as a process of initially having a certain prejudice or some initial belief, and then through our data, it can be viewed as the adjustment or kind of adaptation process of the initial belief to the resulting kind of belief, which corresponds to our posterior distribution. So related to this overall process, let me also mention about the regularization from this Bayesian perspective. Okay, so from the perspective of a Bayesian, suppose your parameters, so for example, we can also consider the linear regression one, is ax plus b, and still here, we can also think of a and b are, random variables. Okay, so a is not a constant but unknown value, but these are random variables. And your initial belief is they are Gaussian and they have zero mean, and for example, 2 squared, and for example, 1 squared. So somehow you have this kind of initial belief. Okay, initial belief. Okay, so in the case of having so many data, and then these initial belief will be just ignored, right? But if you have 100 data items, and then suppose A is optimal parameter A is determined as, for example, 3. Okay, so it is just an adjustment process, as I mentioned, right? So based on your data, it sounds like, or it seems like A is 3, okay, purely based on our data. But we have our initial belief of having A is distributed centered at 0, right? So it means among many other values, our initial belief is saying that the parameter alpha is more likely to be around 0, right, compared to other bigger values, right? So in this case, if we combine this initial belief, okay, of having around 0 value for this A, but our data is saying A is 3, and then our adjustment is like, if it is a conjugate prior, and then A when the probability distribution of an A when given our data, okay, and then it will also be normal because we will maintain the same class of distributions and the parameter. Suppose this one was not changed yet. This is a hypothetical scenario, but also, but in the case of mean, it will be, for example, 0.70% and 3.30%. So it's like weighted average. Okay? Weighted average of the value that our data is saying, okay, and our initial belief. Okay? In that sense, the actual mean value will be 0.9, right? So even if our data is saying that purely based on our data, the optimal value of an A is 3, but due to our initial belief and by incorporating our Bayesian process, or Bayesian generation process, our distribution of A, after looking at the data, and then that distribution will be centered at 0.9 instead of 3. Okay? So it's like, it's having the effect of Yeah, it's exactly the regularization effect of like L2 or L1 norm regularization. So if you studied the Bayesian statistics or this generative kind of perspective of a linear regression, and then L2 regularization is exactly this corresponding to the Bayesian approach where alpha and beta are following the normal distribution, and also if you consider L1 normalization, okay, then it's exactly corresponding to the case where we start with our primary distribution as Laplace distribution. So Gaussian is this guy. The Laplace distribution is something like this. Okay, it's still similar to Gaussian, but it's a different class of distribution. Okay? So you can kind of see those nice mathematical proofs of showing equivalence between this L2 regularization with the Gaussian prior and the Bayesian approach, and the L1 regularization corresponding to the Laplace prior Bayesian approach. So if you're interested, you can easily find the literature and the nice mathematical proofs on the internet, I believe. So yeah. So the time's up. So any questions before ending the class? Okay, so that's it for today. So yeah, let's see you next week. 네. 40분에 미팅 있어요. 45분인가? 네. 7시 15분 아니에요? 그러니까. 네, 근데 뭐 먼저 누가 와서 40분에 미팅 한. 선을 넘. 그래, 잠깐 뭐 한 10분 정도 이야기했었어요. 네네. 아니면 어차피 영무실로 갈 건데.